Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we've got a very special beer that I have been saving for a while, and today is the day I'm finally going to jump into it. So this is going to be a beer from a brewer I have never had any of their offerings prior. I did get this one from Tavour. One of the things I love about Tavour is it lets me find beers from brewers I have never seen in my local market. So today is not only a first beer from a new to me brewer, but also a first for the sub-style. It's a style I've only done a few beers of in the past. It's been a very long time, but this is a very interesting sub-style on it. The brewer in question today is Threads Brewing Company. They are based in Westlake Village, California, and this beer is called 5X Red, and it is a quintuple red ale that clocks in at 17% ABV. Now, this is quite higher than your average red ale. Indeed, this puts to shame many barley wines and imperial stouts that I've had over the years. 17% is an extremely high ABV on any beer. That's higher than your average wine. But this is in the format of a red ale and quintuple, I think aptly named. They also further go on to state on this 100 IBUs. So I have really high hopes. I saw this one pop in Tavour. I said, okay, first brewer, time I've seen this brewer, read about the beer, saw what it was, and said, I know this is going to be special. I have to grab it. So today's the day. In terms of label art, it's just a very clean design. 5X to go along with their 5 Threads Brewing Company. Nice clean design can, nice crimson. All right, so red ale. Let's get this cracked. I'm using my nice little Sierra Nevada kind of beer can style glass here. I don't use it often, but it's kind of a good, just kind of all-purpose glass. So we'll use that for our red ale today. Yep, pouring this obviously 17%. We know it's going to have a lot of malts in there. The boost up the ABV that high. So yes, it's got a lot of caramel and brown. It does have a red tint, but you know, when you're boosting an ABV up that high, you're going to have a lot more malts in there, which are naturally going to impart a lot more depth of color. I can tell you as I have this poured, it smells very, very strongly. Now, I didn't see on here that they mentioned any kind of barrel aging, but I can tell you the intensity of aroma coming off is not dissimilar to an aroma you would get off of a barrel-aged beer. Holding this up visually, yeah. Okay, it's kind of a reddish caramel. So yeah, this actually has a lot more red in the color profile than I did anticipate, just given the high ABV, but it's really stunning. You would have to have very bright LED lights as I do, but I can tell you that is actually a bright true red, holding that directly up to a light source. Formed a pretty decent head. This glass, to be fair, is not the best for head formation and retention. You really have to be aggressive. I could have been more aggressive, but it did a pretty good job. There's a nice bit of creamy cling all around the edge and a nice little pad still floating on top. So let's get right up over this for a proper sniff. Wow, yeah. That does smell very nice. It does have a little bit of a booziness to it on the aroma. 17% you might expect it, but it does put me in mind of like bourbon barrel-aged beer. I'm going to reread this just to see if they mention anything about it being barrel-aged. They do not, at least in their description about it, and I don't see it on the side saying it's barrel-aged either. So I think all of that aroma is just coming straight from the base beer itself. So it has this nice boozy aroma, but it does have these kind of sweet, bourbon-like aroma qualities to it as well. And red ales are typically going to be a maltier beer style traditionally, but boosting an ABV up like this, it's just going to add a ton of intensity, and that clearly is bleeding minimally into the aroma. It smells absolutely fantastic. It looks the part. It smells great. Let's just jump into this huge beer and see what this is about. Oh, man. Oh, that is positively huge. Okay, so, yeah, this is way bigger, way more complex than I even could have possibly imagined. before I come back and do the scores, I am going to do a little research, but I'm kind of glad that I didn't go any further than just reading off of the can what they say about it. This really tastes as big and bold and complex as a big barrel-aged barley wine. I am not kidding. I am absolutely blown away on first sip by this beer. I had a feeling it was going to be special. This is far and away more special than I ever could have possibly imagined. And it's so unassuming in this just little normal 12-ounce can. Unbelievable. The intensity, the presence this beer has is massive, let alone just knowing what it is, what they tell you it is, but nothing can prepare your taste buds for what they get into on that first sip. So before we get into that, let's talk texture. Body and mouthfeel. This is a heavier beer. I only had a small little swallow here. It's high ABV, only 12 ounces. I want to take my time with it, work through it, but it definitely has presence. There's weight to it, which you would expect. There's a lot of fermentables that went in to boost the ABV up that high. Yeah, I expected it to have a nice, robust body. It absolutely does. The mouthfeel, it's not thick, and it's a red ale that's not typically a thicker beer style, but you can feel the resistance. It's resistant like you would expect a 17% ABV beer of any style really to be. It's not like a milkshake style, but there's natural resistance in it, 17%. So yeah, it's there. It feels the part. Weight-wise and texture-wise, it's really, really nice. Exactly as expected. What I didn't expect was just how big and bold this flavor profile was. I mean, I should have, but it really does taste like almost like a bourbon barrel-aged barley wine. There is a very distinct flavor that comes off of this that matches the aroma that I said, that smells bourbon barrel-aged to me. It tastes it. I'll have to research to see if they just didn't print it on the can, but it smells and tastes like a bourbon barrel-aged beer, and it's absolutely delicious. I don't know if that's just coming from this really high ABV and all of the malts and the yeast and how they all work together. If so, this is a really, really magical pull-off on this beer, but what they did, but it's absolutely incredible. So in the flavor profile, I would say there are elements about this that do remind me of a typical red ale. Yes, it's maltier, and there's a lot of layers coming from that malt side, but this is not one that tastes doughy or bready. You can often get that with red ales. It's one of the things I actually like about them. They put me in mind of several other beer styles that are very malt-centric. Yes, I'm a hophead, but I do also really like malty beers as well. It's just about the differences you can get in varying beer styles and the balance of them, and this is incredible. What I didn't expect was all this layer of complexity and deep, rich fruit, very much like you would find in a classic barley wine. There are absolutely fig flavors coming through in this beer. There's kind of candied apricots. There's plums. There's a lot happening in this beer, along with this natural caramelly and toffee-like flavor profile, which is common in a red ale anyway. But then adding all these other flavors and aromas, like it easily, if you put this in a blind tasting lineup, there is no reality I would say that that is a red ale of a high ABV or otherwise. I would 100% guess that this were a barrel-aged barley wine. That is exactly what it smells like and tastes like to me, and that is honestly high praise. And if you really think about what makes a barley wine, what makes any beer, when you start getting into those ABVs, a lot of it does make sense. You can take whatever style you want, but at a certain point, you're going to hit that wall. And once you keep adding in malt and malt and malt and making it more concentrated, and the ABV goes up and up and up, and the yeast has to do its thing, you're just adding layers and layers of flavor, of color, of aroma, of depth into the beer. So it can be any number of different substyles, but you're going to get a lot of common threads when you get into the beers in this ABV range. But I gotta say, I am absolutely blown away. This is incredible. So there's a lot I just talked about, a lot I just experienced. The short story is I love it. I'm going to go back in for another small sip here. Just let everything re-intensify. Pick apart anything I may have not grabbed on the first sip. Then we're going to talk about this finish, but it's great. It's great. I can say that unequivocally. This is great. It's that swallow up front. It's immediately on swallowing. It tastes like bourbon barrel aged beer to me. And it's really intense bourbon flavor. I mean, it literally tastes like bourbon barrel aged beer. If there's no bourbon or bourbon barrels or barrel aging involved in this, I don't know how they did it, but it tastes exactly like it. And when you swallow, you get that nice burst of this big caramel and toffee, and this one does almost have this buttery undercurrent to it. So it's like a buttered toffee. It's very rich, very nice, and there's almost kind of creme brulee-like sugars, almost like they culinary torched creme brulee sugars mixed in with this butter, toffee, and caramel, and it's rich in this bourbon flavor. It's absolutely incredible. After about the 5, 6, 7 second mark, the underlying other flavors start to pop in. So you do start to get this very grainy, this very dough-like quality, and that's also where I start to get these notes of figs and like baked candied apricots and plums. It's very nice, it's very rich. There's a little bit I didn't catch on the first sip on the back end. Once I'm getting now probably 30, 45 seconds in, and the intensity is back down just a little bit, I'm starting to get undercurrents of vanilla and even some raisin-like quality popping in. And it's all still intermingling. It's just adding new and new layers and layers of flavor complexity. It's absolutely delicious. This is a big, big, complex beer. This is a beer for people that love big, bold, in-your-face beers. No question about it. If you don't like intense beers, I wouldn't recommend it to you. This is intense. I mean it. I gotta say, this is intense. It is a flavor experience of intensity, and it's not for the faint of heart. The last thing I want to talk about before we get in the nitty-gritty of the finish is they mention 100 IBUs, International Bitterness Units. We talk about this often. That's really the scientific number, but IBUs are all relative to the person involved. My bitter perception may be completely different than yours. Though I gotta say, I wouldn't guess 100, but it for sure clearly has a bigger bitter bite than your average red ale. Normally they're very malt dominant. This clearly still is, but there is a noticeable kind of hop bite. It's not intense and lingering like a big West Coast style IPA, but it is there and it does come up front. It just mixes with everything else. I guess it's just this wall of intensity that's so big, everything is just kind of hitting you at once and you're just constantly trying to pick apart what it is you're experiencing. Massively complex. Last thing I want to say about this is the finish. The finish on this is very long, as you might expect. And it does finish very much like a barrel-aged barley wine finishes. So it's still very big, bold, and it's lingering. What I'm left with on the back of the palate tastes to me still like intense kind of creme brulee sugars and buttered toffee as well as bourbon. Again, I don't know where that flavor is coming from or the aroma, but that's what it tastes like to me. And it really does linger on the back of the palate very, very long. Ton of mileage out of each sip. Really, really does linger on the back. Very wet, very round, all the way to the end. Just absolutely incredible beer. This is so much better than I even had the highest of hopes it would be. I love it. I'm going to take my time, slowly sip on this one over the next few hours, count my scores. When we come back, we will get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was 5 Threads Brewing Company 5X Red, a quintuple Imperial Red Ale, clocking in at 17% ABV. 5 Threads Brewing is based in Westlake Village, California. So I had been saving this one. It sounded amazing, and I had a suspicion it was going to be a special beer, and it really, really was. This one nearly cleaned it in all categories. There was only one category out of all 10 where it did not get a perfect score. That was in the head and the retention. It was above average. I gave it a 7 out of 10. Part of that could have been my fault in the glass that I used. Typically, you have to be a bit more aggressive, and this only being a 12-ounce can, like, I didn't start it quite as quickly as I probably should have, but it still did a pretty good job. Look, it is what it is. I just rated what I experienced. But, I mean, really, we're talking negligible. This was just about a perfect beer for my money. Very, very unique beer drinking experience. It was not at all what I expected it was going to be, and I was absolutely blown away across the board. So 7 out of 10 in head retention, perfect 10 out of 10 in all remaining categories. That's aroma, taste, body, mouthfeel, finish, appearance, balance, filling in the intangible, my subjective thoughts category, and example of style, which does bring the total score on 5 Threads Brewing Company 5X Red to a 97 out of 100. This was just about beer perfection. You know, off of a tap, I would have given this a perfect score. If I had maybe used a different glass and been more aggressive in the beginning, probably would have had a perfect score. I'm just guessing, but you know, it could be my fault. At any rate, this is one I would recommend to any big beer fan. If you don't like big, bold, pungent, in-your-face beers, this is probably not the beer for you. But if you like that, and or you like barrel-aged big Imperial stouts, barley wines, you definitely owe it to yourself to try this beer. First beer I've had from 5 Threads Brewing Company. This will most certainly not be the last. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit that bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.